Hi, I'm the GP guy, as you guys probably know, and today we'll be doing a paper 2 workshop that's focused on the full components, SAQ, summary, and AQ. Okay, so before I get started, just a reminder that for the whole duration of the webinar, please keep your mics off, okay, muted, and there's no need to show your faces also. So we can probably go through the questions that you have submitted at the end, and only then, if you have something to ask, you can unmute your mic then lah. Yeah, but in the meantime, just keep the mics muted, all right? Okay. Okay, so just a background context. I'm Aaron. I graduated from Raffles Institution a couple of years back, specifically 2 years back. Okay, I completed my A levels in 2020. Yeah, so for now, I'm currently awaiting my uni. I'll be going to NTU at the end of the year if you are curious. But yeah, back then I started out the GP guide because I wanted to basically create accessible content for you guys to prepare for the general paper subject. So as you can see, if you're new to the page that I have, okay, you can basically look at the variety of posts that I usually create for a weekly revision. So it ranges from topical summaries or even essay questions that is tested in prelims or TPs in schools. Okay, but if not, then to move on. Okay, so for today, we'll be going through some comprehension techniques as well as the other three components, SAQ, summary, and AQ. Along the way, you'll be able to better understand what does each component entail and what you should be trying to look out for if you're not scoring for them yet. Okay, so without further ado, now for comprehension, right, it's important to know what you're dealing with and how much time you should allocate for each compartment, okay, so that you'll be able to better prepare yourself during the revision so that you won't lose track of time. So there are three parts that you need to be able to secure, I feel personally, so as to better able to prepare for your paper 2 during the exam. So the first part is time management. What do I mean by time management? Okay, let's do some breakdown. Okay, it's simple math here. Oh, these are the questions that we're going through later on. Yeah, these are from the questions that you have submitted in the form. But anyway, paper 2, 50 marks. That's the full marks. Okay, there's 35 marks for content, 15 marks for language. And for the 35 marks, we have a breakdown of SAQ, summary, and the AQ. Okay, SAQ is 17 marks, summary is 8 marks, and the AQ is 10 marks. So it is ideal that you spend around 30 minutes at least for the AQ. Summary should be about 15 to 20 minutes. And the SAQ should be about 40 minutes, 40 to 45, depending on how fast you can infer. Yeah. So it is best if for the SAQ, for each question, okay, you keep in mind that for every mark, okay, depending on how many marks is allocated for the question, you give yourself at least 2 minutes per mark. Yeah, so for those 1 mark questions, for example, they're usually pretty short. Okay, the answer isn't that long-winded, so just go straight to the point, and that should take about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, give or take. Yeah, save your time and ration yourself well so that you'll be able to finish the whole paper lah, essentially. So far I've seen students, my own students, who couldn't finish the paper because, for instance, they spent too much time on this part. Okay, maybe they say that, oh, I couldn't understand what the question is trying to say, and then they spend too much time trying to figure out what each question is trying to say, what the author is trying to say, and in the end they squish the summary and the AQ for the last half an hour. So it's not good. Okay, even if you're not doing well for SAQ, it's fine. By the 45th, 50th minute mark, you should move on already, because if you don't do well for the first component, at the very least, don't sacrifice the other two components. You know, you don't want to lose your marks for the whole paper overall. So make sure that you have enough time separate for each component for the paper 2 so that you don't compromise your individual segments. Okay, so that's basically what I mean by time management. Paraphrasing. Obviously, you guys should know that paper 2 is all about paraphrasing. There's paraphrasing from the first segment, SAQ, use your own words as far as possible. Summary also, paraphrasing. Not the AQ though. Okay, but that's still a huge component of paper 2 lah. I know some of the questions that you guys have submitted are at the back. Okay, stuff like, oh, how should I better paraphrase? Okay, there's this question here. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Yeah, I have problems with paraphrasing. We're practicing more help by building a work bank, so and so. Other questions related to paraphrasing also. So for paraphrasing, I would have to say that it's also quite important. Okay, you need to be able to build up a decent level of vocabulary. I don't know whether you read, okay, if you listen to podcasts or you read magazines or op-eds, either way is good to have a constant supply of fresh vocabulary every day, preferably. Yeah, because you don't want to limit yourself to the few mundane words, and ultimately for A levels you will not be able to find the right words to express yourselves. Yeah, so this is also important for not just paper 2 but also for for essay also. Language is a huge component. Okay, 15 marks also for the language, no, sorry, 20 marks. Yeah, so you need to be able to write a variety of vocabulary words to be able to express your arguments better. Yeah, so same thing. And yes, for this question, whoever asked this question, it helps. Okay, the word bank, I myself have a word bank. I know friends who have a word bank, and we don't just build it, we use it. Okay, we use it in day-to-day homework for other subjects like, I don't know, economics, or for other humanities subject. Okay, whenever you are free, just look through them, try to refresh your memory about some of the words. Gradually, you'll be able to build up your proficiency for all these different words. So yes, it does help. Okay, but anyway, back to the earlier component. And the last part, content awareness, that's something that you also need to build up. If you thought that content awareness is only important for paper 1, then you're wrong. Okay, because paper 1 is where you need all the examples, yes, but paper 2 also, for the AQ, right? You need to be able to be familiar with what is going on in Singapore. So I think it's quite useful if you are preparing, you're compiling examples for different topics in Singapore. The reason being is because you are not only doing it for the essay, for those questions about your society, you're also doing it for paper 2, for the AQ component. So it's at the very least something that you must prepare yourself for, because it is your society. You'll be questioned to write a 10 marks piece of essay, a mini essay, on how much you understand Singapore and how well you know about the trends, the culture, social political history, environmental, what are different stuff that we're currently doing in Singapore. Yeah, so that's something that you need to be able to finish yourself up on. Okay, but I'll get on to the details later on as to where you can get your sources from lah. Okay, but moving on. Okay, starting off with the short answer questions, as I've mentioned, you need to be able to allocate at least 40 to 45 minutes. I know there are many questions that we can expect, and don't expect me to cover all of them today because it's just too many to cover. So what I'm going to try to do is I'll at least try to get you guys to differentiate between two very common types of questions. Okay, the broad macro themes of questions. There's two inferential and literal questions. Okay, so what do they mean? Now, literal types of questions are basically questions that expects you to paraphrase ideas, again, paraphrasing, okay, using your own words. You'll need to be able to understand what the author is trying to say and use your own words to repackage whatever points he had mentioned in the passage. So, unlike inferential questions, there is no hidden agenda. There is no need for you to infer. All you have to do is to find and paraphrase. That's it. Okay. So some examples here. How does the author explain his claim that pessimism can be a consoling force? So, according to the author, why is it a myth that a crowd is a single beast with one brain and 1,000 limbs? These questions are real questions. They are from the following schools. I've put their question number and the year also already, so you can go and check on your own also. But yeah, I think a lot of students, they might be quick to jump to conclusions and try to use their own understanding or their own way to infer once they see the words like explain, or when they see why. But a lot of times, first thing they need to do is to identify whether or not the points are there for you. Don't try to paraphrase this. Okay, I mean, we'll be doing question 2 later on lah. Okay, so you get to have a chance to have a shot at it. Yeah. Another question is how. I think how questions generally, for most of the time, they are literal questions, because when they ask you how does the author explain something or how does the author prove something, he's asking you what did he do, what did the author say, what did the author do to prove his point. So you just have to go and find out what did he say, what is the points that he mentioned, or what are the techniques that he had used to prove his point. That's it. Okay, just go and identify it and rephrase it in your own words. So taking for example question number 2, this is a workshop, so there's going to be some hands-on part, but it's good if you guys have like a piece of paper nearby or maybe a tablet that you can try it out lah. Okay, I'll give you guys about like 1 minute roughly to just think of the ideas and how you would answer the question. But yeah, the image that you see in front of you is a snapshot of it's a screenshot of the question paper. Okay, so everything that you will need for this question is within the passage. Okay, so it's been about 1 minute. Even if you're not done, it's fine. Okay, you can just cross-check what you have thought so far roughly with whatever I'm about to go through with you. All right, so now the underlying phrases that you see here, those in red, are the answer. Okay, the question says, why is it a myth that the crowd is so and so? A myth. A myth is the opposite of a fact. Okay, it's something that is wrong. So why is it something? Why is this phrase? The crowd that the phrase that says that the crowd is a single beast with one brain and 1,000 limbs. Why is this phrase wrong? It is because of the fact that the crowd is made up of a diverse set of people in a crowd, and that's why we don't behave as one, and everyone behaves differently with different cooperation thresholds for participation. Yeah, so everything is there. Okay, that's the answer. I've seen students who ignore those in red, and they just go straight to unpacking in their own words. They use their own understanding of a single beast and their own understanding of a brain, 1,000 limbs, and they make no reference to the passage at all. So that is not something that we're trying to go for lah. Okay, but for your reference, for this question, the answer would be, to paraphrase this, it is a myth as the crowd does not usually act in the same way. Okay, instead we are made up of a variety of personalities, and everyone has a varying levels of willingness to join crowds. Yeah, so that's the paraphrase for different cooperation thresholds for participation. Yeah. Okay, so in contrast, for inferential types, this is a little trickier because you need to be able to understand what the author is trying to say. Okay, there's sometimes, if you're lucky, the message is in there, but sometimes it might not even be there. You need to be able to unpack it on your own. So to understand and answer inferential questions, you need to be able to unpack what is the author's intention. Some of the questions here. Same thing. Okay, I've put the schools there and the question number as well as the year. So you can go and find it on your own afterwards too, if you have the access lah. So what is the author's purpose in asking the question? What is he implying by writing winning in inverted commas? Okay, punctuation questions, those that ask bracket. Why does the author use bracket for this sentence? Why does he put this word in bold? Why is it hyphenated? Why is there inverted commas like in this question? Normally these questions are inferential. You are needed to be able to identify what the author is trying to do. What is his motive in using these tools? Okay, these punctuation tools. So usually it comes in two parts. Okay, I'm not going to go through it specifically, but just I think there's a question who asked about this. So just to give you an overview, okay, there's going to be two parts to the answer. The first part is the function, and the second part is the context. So each part is usually 1 mark lah. That's how they usually allocate the marks. And the functions are usually got to do with the author's emotions. So maybe he's expressing sarcasm, maybe he is criticizing, maybe he is skeptical. Yeah, these are his attitudes towards the message, okay, the topic at hand, and then the context. So what is he skeptical about? He's skeptical about the fact that youths can create change in the world today. That is the context. Okay, this context will depend on whatever is being presented or argued about in the passage. So you have to see the passage and understand what he's trying to say, and that's how you pair up the function, criticisms, skepticism, or doubt, so and so the attitudes with the corresponding context. Yeah, explain what the author suggesting. Okay, in this case, I think we're doing the third question next. Let me see. Oh yes, we're doing the third question next. Okay, so uh, again, I'll give you guys another 1 minute. This question is actually relatively straightforward. It's a comparative question. Okay, that means that you see this thing called laughter and a lubricant in a social setting. So the topic is about the importance of humor, okay, and why is it important to laugh and embrace humor. But why is it that the author suddenly mentions these 4 words, lubricant in social settings? Like, what is the purpose of inserting this here? Okay, that is something that you need to be able to infer and unpack on your own, which I'll be giving you slightly shorter, I think about 30 seconds to 40 seconds just to think about it. Okay. Okay, so very simply, the answer is not going to be in the passage. So this is just an underline of what most people would turn to lah. Okay, if you're thinking of paraphrasing, amusing story down the park, making a self-depreciating joke after someone pays you a compliment, or telling a dark joke at the funeral, all these are not the answer. Okay, it just tells you what the author is thinking about when he's writing this, but it's not. Okay, so in this case, when the author makes a reference to a lubricant in a social setting, the word is there for you. She mentioned the words compares. Okay, so the word compares implies that you have to compare. Okay, that's very logical, right? So starting off, maybe you can talk about the function of whatever is in the code here. In this case, the comparison is made to this thing called a lubricant. What does a lubricant usually do? Okay, they usually reduce tension, right? They usually reduce friction between surfaces. That is common sense. That's something that we know is the function of a lubricant. And then we would reference back to the topic, which is laughter. So the author is trying to say that, just like how a lubricant can reduce friction between surfaces, Laughter can also be used to ease the tensions or ease the awkwardness in social settings or between people. Yeah. So you won't be able to find whatever I just said in the passage. It's something that you need to be able to understand, okay, where the author is coming from, and use your own words to convey the idea lah. But this is just one of the questions that is inferential, okay, where you have to use your own understanding of the author's message. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that helps. You will see a lot of variance for this kind of question. It's actually very kind because they ask you, they mention the word compares for you, but sometimes they don't even mention these words. They just say, for instance, explain what the author means by lubricant in social settings. Okay, that's it. Then that would sound no different from this question, right? Because they are both the same. There's like this random quote and they're asking you why. Why is the author saying this? So I think the difference is you have to be able to differentiate the context, find out if the answer is in the passage, and otherwise, if it's not, then you have to infer and come up with your own understanding. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so some general tips for SAQ is you need to be able to understand the questions very clearly. There are clues here and there. Okay, like I mentioned earlier on, for this question, there's this word called compares. If you have no idea that this is how you're supposed to phrase your answer, now you have some hint. It's right here for you. There are other clues where they mention at the end of paragraph 1 or in line 18. Okay, all these are clues that you need to be able to tell where the answer is. Usually the answer for SAQ for each question is within the same paragraph. There is no need to jump across 3-4 paragraphs to get the answers. Okay, usually at most maybe they are spread out across 2 paragraphs, but usually it's in the same paragraph. So make sure you get that right at the very least. Yeah, I still have students who uh get their answer from the wrong paragraphs. Maybe they read wrongly or they are too tired or something. So just be careful of that, okay? Yeah. Um, okay, go with the flow. What does that mean? Go with the flow, basically what I'm trying to say is for 3 marks questions, sometimes when the passage gives us you a long story, like in this case, you have a lot of parts to be able to, paraphrase. This is the full answer. And let's say this question is 3 marks. Okay, so you do not want to jump around. You do not want to paraphrase this part first, followed by this part, and then this part. You're jumping around. Is confusing. It's very confusing because we might, as the markers, we might associate this paraphrase for this paraphrase. Yeah, we might think that the third one is the third part that you're trying to convey is meant for the first part. So when the order gets mixed up, okay, and we don't see the link there, so that's when the marking might be a little bit more stringent lah. Yeah, so make sure that for questions with multiple points, more than 1 point, maybe 3-4 points, you lay out the order of the points in sequence and avoid jumping around. Yeah. um Yes, and lastly, using your own words. Okay. I have seen students who use not their own words. Okay, they just plug the passage words and they use it in the answers, and then they end up losing marks. Okay, when simply changing one word, if you had changed one word, you could have gotten the mark, but because they missed it out, maybe it's in the next sentence, maybe it's in the previous sentence, but they missed it, and that's why they missed getting the mark also. Yeah. So just be careful, okay, for SAQ. If not, moving on to summary. Summary, as I mentioned, 15 to 20 marks, depending on how fast you can be in reading and paraphrasing. This is just the average spread, okay, the division of marks that we will see for summary. Although this is not always the case though. Okay, I have seen passages with 17, 18 plus points. Yeah. So either way, all I have to say is that for summary, there are always more points than the marks. Okay, you can always find more than what you need. And that means that there are many, many points in the passage that you have to be able to look through. and be careful not to miss. Yeah, sometimes I know as students, I myself also miss a couple of points, and I would think that why does this passage have no points? Okay, but actually they're all there for you. It's just a matter of looking out for them. Yeah, so three areas to note: the scope. What do I mean by that is when they mention paraphrase the ideas from paragraph 5 to 7. Okay, sometimes students miss that because they're nervous. Very basic, but it happens. So look out for the numbers and the lines so that you paraphrase the right idea from the right parts. Note taking. Now I think I've seen a question at the back about reading skills. How do I improve my reading skills? I think it helps if you're a visual learner. You cannot stand the voice in your head. You need to have something to pen down your thoughts. So it'll be good to have a pencil or a pen or a ruler. You can just highlight some of the points, draw some of the points, annotate them along the way. Yeah, maybe you can write A, B, C, D, E, F, so and so, and categorize them. So make sure that you have all the points identified first before you can start writing them out. Yeah, the risk of you starting straight away, which means you don't plan, you don't annotate, you don't find, you just start doing straight away, is that along the way when you have finished writing most of the summary, and then you relook at the passage, realize that, oh, I've missed a point from before. Then that's when you can't just insert it in the middle. I mean, you could, but it's just very awkward because the flow is gone already. So what you might want to do is to annotate first, make sure that you have all the points identified before you start to write your summary. Yeah. Okay. So some tips to help you to find the right points. Make sure that after you have identified the points and you have paraphrased it, keep a checklist of these 3 points. Does it capture the original meaning of the passage? So is any part of it changed? Do you alter the definition by some reason? If you did, then make sure that you can change it back. Okay. Is it too awkward or is it too weird? So language is still a huge component, and you need to be able to make sure that the way you articulate yourselves, okay, the punctuation, the verb that you use, the conjunctions, they are all there, and they can help to smoothen out the flow of the summary. So avoid writing down random points, just blurting them out without connecting them properly. Yeah, and lastly is of course the word count. You don't want to use a long phrase when you can just summarize it in an even shorter word. I think maybe you can consider checking on this at the end of the paper when you have more time. Then you want to go back and check, see whether you can shorten some words here and there to fit into the 120 words count. Yeah, okay. And I think most schools should have covered on this. Avoid paraphrasing examples such as names, people, places, statistics. Don't paraphrase examples or anecdotes. If the author is telling a story about his childhood, about the time when he ate an ice cream, okay, just ignore it, move on. Spend your time in other areas to look out for other points. Yeah. Sometimes an entire paragraph can be an example. Okay, it happens. So don't question yourself. Just move on. Yeah. Okay. So, now this is the part where I move on to AQ. For AQ, I just want to mention that there are basically two main parts that I'm going to be covering today, the body paragraphs and the introduction. So for the introduction, you want to know that it is very short and concise. There is no need to elaborate too much because you are just introducing a mini essay. Okay, so make sure that you have two parts, the summary and the stand. Here's an example. So the topic was about leaders and leadership in society. Okay, and this is a piece that I written back then. So this is my own original AQ response. So all I did was to summarize what John Gardner, the author, has made, what are some of the arguments, and then I just listed down what I agree with and what I disagree with. Yeah, so this is my my summary of his arguments. Yeah, just 2 short sentences. Okay, and moving on. Now, as for the basic structure of an AQ body paragraph, it's actually very similar to the essay. Okay, peel paragraph again. There's always the pure paragraph structure that is adopted for essays in A levels for GP. So you realize that at the first sentence you should be quoting the author's argument. Okay, establish what is it that you agree or you disagree with. After you have quoted it, break down what it's trying to say. Now this part is important because it depends on the question, because sometimes when you quote, let's say, a metaphor or a figurative speech, then there is a need for you to break down and paraphrase. But if the author's argument is already made very explicitly, then there is no need for you to further break down on what the author is trying to say. Okay, so let's say, for example, I know this sounds very hard to understand. So let's say I'll give you an example from ACJC. This was from 2021 ACJC prelim paper. This is about crowds, the power of crowds. Okay, so for paragraph, let's say 3, this paragraph, right? Now you notice that they mention stuff about how crowds have always been under threat. Okay, there will be violence, there will be people throwing cafe chairs, celebratory worshipful crowds going wrong, mass panic, so and so. The point that our quote is here, yeah, because this entire paragraph is talking about how crowds can help to make violence possible. So they're talking about the nature of crowds being violent. Yeah, that's how most crowds can be. That is what the author is trying to say. So for me, I think I can either quote this sentence or I will quote this sentence. Yeah. But if I have to quote this sentence, then you'll notice that this makes no sense, right? There is no gentle mob, no friendly pack. Like, that doesn't tell me anything. So what does it mean? No gentle mob, no friendly pack. I think after you quote this, you have to spend maybe a short sentence or two to explain what it means. It's trying to say that, the author is, in other words, implying that crowds are violent in nature. Yeah, so that would be your unpacking or your inference of this sentence. Then that's when you move on to further elaborate on your point. Yeah. Okay. Then you might want to go on to explain why. So that's the explanation. Why is it that you agree that, let's say, I think crowds in Singapore are violent in nature because of so and so? What is it about Singapore that might cause this tendency for our crowds to be violent? Okay. Explain with regards to our social political culture. Now, in Singapore, I would say that you need to be able to think about the trends. Okay, what has happened over the past couple of years, 10 years, 20 years? What is it about our political system? Okay, our cultural system that maybe enables these crowds to be violent or not? Up to you. Okay, it depends on which stand you're for. But for me, I think here's an example. Okay, this is back to the let me see, John Gardner passage. Yeah, so this is an example of what I mean by a pure paragraph. There is the point, there's the explanation. I didn't paraphrase or unpack the point further because it's already pretty straightforward. Okay, the author mentions, John Gardner mentions that humans today are anxious but immobilized. So this was what he mentioned. I think it's pretty straightforward already. And I just moved straight on to explaining why. Why is it that a lot of times in Singapore that's not the case? I mentioned how is it that thanks to social media, the advent of the internet causes us to be more aware of what's going on in the world today. Yeah, that's why we feel a sense of empowerment since we are more socially mature, politically aware. Okay, and that's why we can see, as seen from, let's say, recent rallies. There's a green dot rally, there's also the pink dot rally. Up to you. For me, I just chose the green dot, and I talked about how is it that we have young people who stand up to promote climate action. Yeah, and the link is just very short and simple. Okay, just tie back to the original point. That's it. Okay. So moving on, you can just refer back to this because eventually I'll be posting this video up, but it'll just take a while. So moving on, So I think back to the AQ, if you want to plan and decide which arguments to even start off with, there's so many of them throughout the entire passage. So what are the better ones that you can choose to go for? Again, some checklists that you can run through in your mind to decide what is the Singapore stand regarding this issue. Okay, this is back to the content awareness, right? This is the thing that I mentioned at the front. You need to be aware of what is our system, the way we do things, and the way our Singaporeans behave. Yeah, and why is that so? Okay, you need to be able to know at least very briefly what is our attitude towards certain issues and why do we behave the way we do. Yeah. Secondly is, are there any examples? Right, you cannot just smoke your way out of this. You need some actual examples to prove your points. Okay, it can be general observations, it can be a protest, a rally, a case study in Singapore. Okay, and make sure that they are recent. Okay, so avoid quoting examples that are too far back unless maybe you're trying to showcase the historical context for Singapore. But otherwise, usually you want to present recent examples to show that this is still the case for Singapore. Yeah. Okay, so last question. You need to be able to think about your explanation. I think most students, those who are here, and if you're scoring about 4 or 5 or even lower, 3, 2 for AQ, it could be because you are not elaborating well. Maybe you're just listing down examples, uh, and you are not explaining these examples well in response to Singapore's context. Yeah, so these are just some areas that you can think about. What is the long-term, short-term impacts of whatever the author said on our economy, security, or harmony? Yeah, some pointers to note. Okay, so moving on. Now, the last part is where I'll touch on the structure of the AQ. I know that a lot of students are confused still, and that's not very good because by now you should be more or less familiar for the J2s about what a proper AQ should look like. Okay, so this is just the breakdown for a single passage and a double passage comprehension. For single passage, it is very straightforward, just 2 paragraphs minimum, agree and disagree. Okay, and there's a third paragraph if you're fast enough, you can go for it, but I think it's fine if you write 2 lah. Okay, that's the bare minimum. Double passage is where you have 2 authors. Okay, that's very straightforward. Now the difference is that between the first passage, okay, and this one, 2 passages, is that you need to include something called a rebuttal. This is where you evaluate and provide your nuance. Now, why is there a need to present a rebuttal for a double passage paragraph? Okay, it's because you notice that for AQ, what is the purpose of writing an AQ, right? You need to be able to present a nuanced argument or response about whatever the author is saying, right? And for a single passage, when there's one author, you are already providing that balance, that nuance, when you write an agree and disagree. Okay, that this shows that you are not particularly leaning for 100% agree or 100% disagree. Okay, you are having some balance here. But for 2 authors, okay, you're writing 1 paragraph for author A and 1 paragraph for author B. Yeah, so that's 1 paragraph for each author. So in order to maintain the same nuance that you provided for the first single passage, example, you also want to do the same for each of these authors. And that is why we have an agree plus a rebuttal. So that's where I present some um, scenarios in Singapore where even though I agree with what author A has mentioned, there are some limitations to his argument. It's not always 100% applicable. Okay, so what is the context that it doesn't take effect? Okay, in what scenario does it not apply? Maybe it's for a certain age group, or maybe it's because of times. Times have changed. Maybe there's a different belief in the trends, so that's why people are not doing it like I've mentioned before, so and so. So you have to go and find a limitation and exception to disprove of what author A has mentioned. And same goes for author B. Okay, you can disagree with whatever he say, but you should also provide that rebuttal to add some nuance to your response to his point. Yeah, so maybe you can disagree with whatever author B is saying, the same thing. To some extent, however, author B still makes some sense. Maybe in some scenario, okay, his argument still applies for some Singaporeans. In what context? Okay, give some examples or give some uh, case studies to prove your point. Yeah. But one thing to note is ultimately you do not want to end off on a rebuttal. You want to tie back to the original point, which is agree for author A and disagree for author B. So after the rebuttal, okay, remember to tie back that this is, after all, still just a tiny rebuttal, is not meant to overrule the original argument. So that's why ultimately I will still largely agree with author A and I will still largely disagree with author B. Yeah. Okay. So this is just what most schools should be teaching. If your teacher has some specific instructions on how he or she wants you to write the AQ, please follow them, because I'm not the one that's marking your AQ, right? You just want them to give you the marks that you deserve. So follow whatever style that they have taught you. Yeah, this is only for those who have not yet been taught a proper AQ structure. Okay, this is something that works for most schools, actually, and for A levels also. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, okay. If not, then we're pretty much done with the writer workshop. I think this is where as you guys can see, there are two screenshots of the questions that you guys have filled in the form. So I'm just going to switch over to this, right? I have compiled the questions here already. Everything here, there are 15 questions. Okay, as you can see, 15 questions, and they are all here, ranging from paper 2 to paper 1, or even some general JC stuff at the back. So I'm not going to go through all of the questions because some of them have already been mentioned. But if you've got any other questions, you can just feel free to voice out, okay, or you can also just directly message me lah. Yeah, okay. Otherwise, we are pretty much done for the workshop for now. If you've got somewhere else to be, you could just leave first. Yeah. Okay. So thanks everyone. And I hope that your exams go well. Yeah. Okay.